Big news, earthquaking news in cable news. We're starting with some shakeups. Let's get right to it. Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News. He was the network's top-rated primetime host, but Friday's show was his last. The company released a statement saying they mutually agreed to part ways. This follows Fox News' record of $787 million payout last week in a defamation suit over its false claims of election fraud. Meantime, over at CNN, Don Lemon is out. Don had been in trouble recently over comments he made about women and when they're in their prime. CNN made the announcement this morning and wished Don the best in his future endeavors. Whoa, dudes. If you're a political wonk or a nerd like me, this day couldn't get like any crazier.
Well, talk to us. How did you feel when you heard?
Top-rated show, and they didn't even give him a goodbye show. Yeah. Erica, you give a goodbye unless there's something not so conscious uncoupling there. There's some iciness there, right?
Well, yeah, I think. Okay, so I've been in situations, I've been in media for over 20 years, and if I'm being let go, then generally it's like, this was your last show.
Right,
you know, it's
exactly.
after that show. That also, like, I think for people of that magnitude too, it doesn't bode well because a lot of times companies will be like, hey, I know that we're ending the end of your contract, let's ride it out, and then you get a goodbye show because you have that type of belief that they're not going to go rogue and try to tank you in some way. So that's a respect thing as well.
Right.
So it is a little surprising for both, but I'm not surprised because on the Tucker Carlson side, it's shocking. He is top rated. But he makes $35 million a year, and they just agreed to a $787 million judgment. They have another lawsuit coming up, so the math has to math.
That's true. If you guys don't know, Smartmatic is another company of voting. They are suing Fox for $2.7 billion. So that is an upcoming legal battle. Is that what you think influenced this? What do you think?
And to just piggyback of what Erica said, which I completely agree with, we might be looking at a total restructuring of how we look at news. I mean, this has been our normal for the last 10 years, but I remember watching the news with my grandparents, and it wasn't this vitriolic,
right.
And it wasn't so opinionated from the hosts, and you know, again, I think this would have gone on forever in perpetuity if it wasn't for that judgment. I think with that judgment, it's like when you huddle the troops and you say, hey, we're totally restructuring things. Tucker, if you want to be a part of this, you're welcome to, but there's not going to be this, and you're not going to have this guest, and you're not going to have a 10-minute block to pontificate about how you feel. And Tucker, I'm sure was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I do think he had some kind of say in this. He is the most powerful figure over there. So I do think that maybe with the restructuring, obviously this is all speculation, it's all we can do at this point, is he didn't want to be a part of whatever new Fox we're about to see. But it's definitely going to be different.
Yeah, this is all speculation. I think as the week unfolds, we'll get more details into what's going on. My first thought is this won't be the last we see of Tucker Carlson. He'll come out with a YouTube, something in his own network, right? Something. I don't know why they chose to part ways. There's obviously a reason that we will find out. Don Lemon, I think, was given his chance over there. They tried him in a couple different angles, didn't work out. I think it's a restructuring of how we view cable news, right? People don't trust cable news. I know I don't. I know there's influence and bias on each side. People will still argue that that's not the case. It's only with one network. Some might be bigger than others, but there's definitely a bias. If you get rid of top names that people know, maybe it's a restructuring. Maybe it's a start over, a do-over button. Let's try to get the people back, right? We have an election coming up. Let's try to gain that trust back because I know I'm losing trust in cable news. I don't know who to believe. You watch one thing and then you watch something else. It's completely different stories. So I think their angle, maybe they got together and they're like, all right, we'll get rid of Tucker. You got to give us Don Lemon. You know what I mean? So maybe they did something like that. I'm sure that's not what happened. But I do think there's a trust factor that America is losing trust in their cable news.
You couldn't have said that more correctly. And I was just going to say, I wonder if CNN took this opportunity to slip the Don Lemon the slip as this news cycle of Tucker was coming. Because he was surprised.
Here's the thing, though. We haven't had this conversation, but there have been several hit pieces that have come out against Don Lemon in the past few weeks.
Yeah, interesting.
So I don't think that it's a shock because it seems like someone has been gunning for him for quite some time.
Yeah, that does seem like that. All right. Well, is everything becoming too political? That's the question we're asking you guys and all of us after former NBA coach Phil Jackson said he has stopped watching basketball altogether. He said during COVID and following the murder of George Floyd, players wore jerseys with slogans, you guys remember, justice, equality, which he said was turning certain people off. Here's how he explained it on a recent podcast. Take a listen.
They even had slogans on the floor, on the baseline. It was catering. It was trying to cater to an audience or trying to bring a certain audience into play. And they didn't know it was turning other people off, you know? People want to see sports as non-political.
ESPN's Jalen Rose released a video hitting back at Phil. Take a look at this.
The same Phil Jackson that won championships with some of the greatest black athletes in the history of the game. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, made millions on their backs and off their sweat equity. You're sitting up watching a game with your grandkids and y'all think it's funny when justice passes the ball to equal opportunity? When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So stop watching forever.
Al, sports, NBA, you love that, the whole thing. What do you think about this? What about Phil Jackson? What do you think about him?
I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen or heard Phil Jackson make controversial comments. He had issues with LeBron James and his management team. He called them a posse a few years ago. Phil has always been quite outspoken about his not having any interest, especially in the Black Lives Matter movement, which hit people's ears wrong because this is a person that has worked with arguably the most prominent black men that have ever played in the NBA, Shaq, Kobe, Michael, and Scottie, in their primes. I don't think anybody can boast that resume. You know, when he's talking about things being political, I think about the things I've seen on NBA floors. They say things like love, teamwork. Remember, this month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. These are all things that are used in sports because that's when everybody's looking. You don't see vote Democrat on the baseline. It's just like, hey, make sure your mom or your dad or your grandfather gets his prostate checked. Things that'll happen so that they don't die. We're talking about Black Lives Matter so that we don't see more black lives extinguished in the middle of the day by a police officer. These are pretty baseline things. So if there are things that turn him off, I turn the TV off, but the irony that is coming from him is staggering.
Well, I don't know if it's ironic or staggering. Shout out to Roosevelt Cobb because my daddy always said this. We're from Chicago. Watching Bulls games was like what the entire family did on our tiny little television. And my father has always had this feeling about Phil Jackson.
Really?
There's a certain brand of a person who comes across as with the people because they work technically with the people. But when it comes down to it, when it comes to black and brown people, it's great when they're working with the people. But if they're the former coach, they no longer are benefiting the way that he was benefiting before, then now their lives aren't as important. It's the idea of him sitting with his grandchildren and laughing over the social justice movement, these young men who put not only their lives and their ability, their careers. Look at what happened to Colin Kaepernick.
I know.
He was shown so everyone else would be quiet, and they didn't. And that's your response, Phil Jackson?
Yeah, sounds like shut up and dribble, doesn't it?